The engine is dead. Smoke fills the cockpit. Below him, enemy territory. He could bail out, but he doesn't. Instead, he aims his crippled fighter toward American lines. That single decision will change the course of his life and reshape the future of aviation forever. The sky had been his home since before the war began. Hans Vanelia, born in 1914, had spent his youth chasing clouds above a nation preparing for conflict. By the time Europe erupted in flames in 1939, Hans had already become one of the Luftwaffe's most gifted pilots, a man who lived for speed, precision, and the challenge of pushing machines to their limits. By 1944, Hans wasn't just another pilot. He was Germany's top test pilot, the man trusted to fly the Reich's most secret aircraft. From the revolutionary Me-262 jet fighter to experimental bombers that never reached the front, Hans had flown them all. But in December of that same year, his story took a turn no one could have predicted. December 14, 1944. The sky above western Germany is cold and gray. Hans climbs into a Messerschmitt Bf 109, the backbone of the Luftwaffe since the Spanish Civil War. But this isn't a combat mission. He's not chasing bombers or dogfighting P-51s. Today, he's testing modifications, evaluating performance, doing the quiet, unseen work that keeps a dying air force alive. Then, disaster strikes. Without warning, the engine coughs, sputters, and dies. His propeller winds down into silence. No power. No hope of returning home. He's gliding, and below him lies enemy territory. Was it sabotage by forced laborers? A mechanical failure from cheap wartime metals? We'll never know. But we do know this. Instead of bailing out or crash landing in German fields, Hans makes a decision that defies logic. He aims his powerless fighter toward American lines. Why? Official records never said. But in his later writings, Hans claimed he feared crashing into a German town, killing civilians, or being executed if the Gestapo thought he'd lost a valuable test aircraft. The Americans, he reasoned, would at least follow the Geneva Convention. Minutes later, his battered Messerschmitt skids to a halt in a frozen field, behind American lines. He's captured alive. Standard procedure for captured enemy pilots was simple: interrogation, documentation, and transfer to a prisoner of war camp. But when U.S. intelligence learned who they had captured, everything changed. The Americans had just caught the Luftwaffe's most experienced test pilot, a man who knew the secrets of Germany's most advanced aircraft. Lieutenant Colonel Harold Watson, one of America's own top test pilots, was sent to question him. Watson had spent the last 2 years studying captured German planes, trying to understand how they flew, and suddenly, across the table from him, sat the man who had actually tested those aircraft. What was supposed to be a 72-hour interrogation turned into 21 days of non-stop discussions, a meeting of two brilliant aviators on opposite sides of the war. Watson later described it as the most fascinating exchange of my entire career. Hans explained not only how German aircraft performed, but why they were designed the way they were. He revealed how German engineers balanced speed, weight, and firepower, and the desperate shortcuts they took as resources ran dry. Watson was captivated. And then he had an idea that would have been unthinkable just months earlier. What if we let him fly our planes? The Pentagon's first response was immediate and furious. Absolutely not. A captured enemy pilot flying top-secret American aircraft? It broke every security rule in existence. But Watson persisted. He argued that Hans's insights could help the Allies understand not only German weaknesses, but their own strengths. After nearly a month of debate, Washington gave the green light. The operation was classified above top secret. The name, Operation Lusty. The deal was extraordinary. Hans would remain a prisoner of war, but he'd live comfortably at Wright Field, Ohio, the center of U.S. aviation research. He'd only fly aircraft Germany had already encountered in combat, and every mission would be monitored by armed guards. The final condition. Hans had to agree voluntarily. No threats, no bribes, no coercion. When Watson offered him the choice, Hans sat in silence for nearly 10 minutes. He was being asked to help his nation's enemies. But deep inside, he was still a pilot, a man obsessed with flight itself, not politics. Finally, he spoke. "I'll do it, but on 3 conditions. I won't fly any mission that harms German forces. My reports will be honest. And after the war, you help me start a new life in America." Against all odds, the U.S. agreed. March 15, 1945. Wright Field, Ohio. A silver P-51D Mustang gleams under the cold sunlight. The same fighter that had crushed the Luftwaffe's air superiority. Now, a German test pilot walks toward it, to fly the very weapon that had once hunted his comrades. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. But Hans wasn't thinking about politics. As he inspected the aircraft, he was stunned by the meticulous engineering, the quality of the parts, the professionalism of the ground crew. His first flight lasted 2 hours. When he landed, American pilots gathered eagerly around. "What do you think?" they asked. Hans smiled. "Your engineers have solved problems we didn't even know we had." What no one knew, not until decades later, was that Hans's original engine failure had not been an accident at all. Declassified German records from 1978 revealed the truth. Hans Vanelia had sabotaged his own aircraft. His so-called crash had been a defection planned from the start, and the Americans had known it. Over the next months, Hans flew nearly every frontline American fighter, the P-47 Thunderbolt, the P-38 Lightning, and even early jet prototypes like the P-80 Shooting Star. Each flight brought new insights, and new respect between former enemies. When asked why German pilots struggled against the Thunderbolt, Hans explained, "Our fighters were built for short-range interception. Yours are built for endurance. You can stay and fight when we must turn back." He showed the Americans their own aircraft through new eyes, revealing both their brilliance and their hidden flaws. But beyond the data and flight logs, something remarkable was happening. The German defector and the American officers were becoming friends. Watson later wrote, "I expected a Nazi fanatic. I found a professional, one who loved flying as much as I did." Hans, for his part, was discovering that everything Nazi propaganda had told him about Americans, being lazy, undisciplined, inferior, was a lie. He saw skill, order, and integrity. By the war's end in May 1945, those friendships were strong, and Hans's future took another surprising turn. With Germany in ruins, the U.S. Air Force offered Hans a civilian position as a test pilot. It was controversial. Many American pilots objected. But Watson defended him fiercely. "We'd be fools to send this man away." By December 1945, exactly 1 year after his capture, Hans Vanelia officially joined the U.S. Air Force as a civilian test pilot. He worked there until 1950, helping shape post-war aviation, training pilots, and analyzing jet prototypes that would soon dominate the skies of Korea and beyond. When he finally returned to Germany, he helped rebuild its shattered aviation industry, becoming a legend in both countries. But the truth, buried for decades, was far bigger than one man. Hans's story was the blueprint for Operation Paperclip, the secret U.S. program that recruited over 200 German scientists and aviation experts after the war. He wasn't just a defector. He was the first. Watson would later say, "Hans showed us that professional integrity transcends national boundaries." And that, perhaps, is the real lesson. That even in the darkest chapters of history, Men who share a love for their craft can find common ground, even if they once called each other enemies. Hans Vanelia died in 1997, remembered not as a traitor, but as one of the world's greatest test pilots. His story reminds us that sometimes loyalty to truth, skill, and humanity can matter more than loyalty to flags. So here's my question for you. If you were in Hans's place, captured, your country losing, given a second chance, what would you do? Would you hold the line, or fly for the enemy to build a better future? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every one. And if this story fascinated you, make sure to like the video, share it with your friends, and subscribe, because next week's episode will blow your mind. Until then, remember, history's greatest stories aren't just about war and victory. They're about the people who dared to cross impossible lines.